The sky suddenly darkened, not due to approaching clouds, but because a group of Ukrainian drones UAVs was infiltrating Russian territory. 10 UAVs, 10 shadows, glided through one of the world's densest air defense systems without being detected. This was an attack no one thought could happen, especially when the opponent is a military superpower like Russia. But everything changed when these drones, carrying a single-purpose destruction, attack, and annihilation did what even military experts could not imagine. Each of these drones was not just a simple weapon. They were designed not only to fly, but to deceive, to trick Russia's advanced radar systems, making it impossible for them to detect approaching enemy. They weren't fighter jets. They didn't emit the powerful radar signals like combat aircraft, but were small, hard-to-identify UAVs. While these drones didn't have the striking power of missiles or bombs, they were equipped with sophisticated electronic warfare, technology powerful enough to penetrate any enemy air defense system. What made this attack truly surprising was the way these UAVs operated. They flew low, skimming over power lines just meters above the ground. It was the surprise element in this strategy that rendered Russia's defense systems useless. While Russia's radar systems could detect fighter jets from up to 250 kilometers away, these UAVs were invisible to those radars. Each drone was like a ghost, leaving no trace on the enemy's screens. They could even fly past air defense stations without triggering any alerts. But that wasn't all. These UAVs also carried out a flawless tactic. When Russia's radar systems detected them, a chase began. Missiles were launched from Russia's air defense systems, targeting the radar signals they received. But when the UAVs sensed the threat, they did the unimaginable. They shut off their engines. Immediately, all signals vanished from Russia's radar screens, making the enemy's missiles unable to find a target. This tactic was not a coincidence. The UAVs didn't just shut off their engines, they exploited a basic physical concept: radar reflection from the ground. When these UAVs flew low, each radar signal reflected not only from the UAV but also from the ground, creating a ghost image. Russia's missile systems couldn't distinguish between real signals and reflected signals. And once the missiles were launched, they had no target to destroy, instead following ghost signals that led them into meaningless empty space. This operation was not just a physical attack, but also an electronic warfare campaign. In the modern world of warfare, fighting isn't just about using powerful weapons, it's about exploiting and defeating the enemy's technology. These UAVs weren't merely attack tools, they were warriors in an intellectual battle. They didn't fight with missiles, but with Russia's formidable defense systems. And with the sacrifice of one UAV, the remaining 8 escaped the missile pursuit, continuing their journey toward the critical target. Everything unfolded in silence. No gunfire, no loud battles. Only UAVs gliding through the air, like shadows in space, carrying a mission that could not fail: to destroy the target. And as the UAVs got closer, they not only defeated a defense system, but also changed the course of modern warfare, where technology and sophisticated tactics triumphed over the power of traditional weapons of mass destruction. When Russia's air defense systems detected the intrusion, the UAVs were no longer invisible, shadows in the sky. Although they had successfully avoided radar and missiles in the initial moments, this did not mean the danger had passed. Russia was not going to give up on its target easily. And now, the enemy of the Ukrainian drones was no longer just the air defense, missiles, but a true technological war. Russia's defense systems, considered to be the most powerful and sophisticated in the world, began to retaliate. At this point, Russia's electronic warfare team decided to launch a more aggressive attack on the UAVs. The UAVs' communication signals were immediately attacked by powerful electronic jamming systems. One of Russia's most advanced electronic warfare tools was the Borisoglysk-2, a powerful jamming system capable of blurring and destroying all of the UAV's navigation positioning signals. This system emitted electromagnetic waves at extremely high frequencies, preventing the UAVs from maintaining GPS signals or communicating with control stations. With the UAV's signals disrupted, maintaining their flight path became extremely difficult. The drones could now only rely on the inertial navigation system, INS, to maintain their position, but this system had clear limitations. The UAVs had already flown quite a distance into Russian territory, and the INS error began to accumulate rapidly. This meant that with each passing minute, the actual distance between the UAVs and the position that the INS could determine became increasingly unclear. However, in this tense moment, the UAVs did not give up. One of the drones, determined to save the team, performed an unexpected move. To restore the signal, this drone decided to break the silence and transmit a GPS signal, even though it knew that this was a highly risky decision. In just a few brief seconds, the UAV transmitted its position signal. This was a gamble, as while the GPS information was being broadcast, all enemy systems would immediately detect it and retaliate. But the drone took the risk because, without this signal, all the remaining drones would be lost and fall into enemy attack. But, like a miracle, the plan succeeded. The GPS signal transmitted at the critical moment tricked Russia's Borisoglysk-2 system. Control stations in Ukraine received the precise coordinates, allowing them to adjust the flight trajectory of the remaining drones. Although it cost one UAV, this tactic saved the remaining 8 drones. Thanks to that bold decision, the UAV formation continued its journey, now able to maintain speed and a precise path. But faced with this delay, Russia was not going to give up easily. Russia's electronic systems, including MOSA-1, continued to track the smallest movements of the UAVs. This system did not need radar signals to function. MOSA-1 used electronic intelligence and signal collection technology to analyze all data on the enemy's movements, despite the UAV's evasive tactics. While they may have evaded missile attacks, the UAVs could not hide in the darkness forever. This battle was not just about the power of weapons, but about tactics, creativity, and courage. The Ukrainian UAVs now faced an invisible enemy that was always tracking, always pursuing, from behind. And for these small UAVs, this was truly a life-or-death challenge. The moment the UAV dared to break the silence and transmit a GPS signal while facing danger, all attention turned to it. This was not just a simple decision, it was a risky gamble. This action not only determined its survival, but also impacted the entire operation. When the GPS signal was broadcast, all of Russia's electronic systems and radars would immediately scan for it. But without it, the remaining UAVs would be unable to continue, losing their direction and surely being destroyed. In that brief moment, the UAV cut through the tense atmosphere with a powerful signal, like a beam of light in the dark. And, like a miracle, this tactic succeeded. Ukraine's control stations immediately received the precise coordinates, allowing the remaining UAVs to adjust their course. But the price to pay was the sacrifice of one drone, a trade-off between life and death, between victory and defeat. But that was not all. Although the UAVs could now accurately recalibrate their flight paths, they still faced an unimaginable challenge. Russia, not giving up, deployed a new, more powerful electronic system to counter them. MOSA-1, Russia's most sophisticated electronic intelligence tracking system, had been following these UAVs for some time. Unlike conventional radar systems, MOSA-1 did not need to emit signals but relied on collecting information from the weak electronic signals emitted by the UAVs. MOSA-1 had the ability to track and analyze very faint signals, even when the UAVs did not emit active signals. This made it even harder for the UAVs to evade detection. While they had successfully avoided radar and missile attacks, they were now facing an enemy that could hear them without needing to see them. The weak signals from the UAV engines, though very faint, were enough for MOSA-1 to pinpoint their location. And once MOSA-1 had the information, Russia's S-300 and S-400 missiles wouldn't take long to reach their target. Ukraine's control team recognized this clear threat and decided to do something no one had anticipated. They needed to completely cut off all electronic signals. While this would disconnect the UAVs from the command system, it was the only choice to deceive MOSA-1. The UAVs no longer transmitted signals. They flew in absolute silence, like ghosts in space. However, silence is also a double-edged sword. Each UAV now had to rely entirely on optical sensors and the INS, inertial navigation system, which could not be completely accurate under such long-distance and prolonged flying conditions. The INS system's errors began to accumulate gradually, and as time passed, the gap between the actual location of the UAVs and the coordinates calculated by the INS grew larger. The accuracy of the UAVs was now seriously threatened, and if they couldn't reach the target on time, the mission would fail. Meanwhile, Russia showed no signs of easing up. The S-400 missiles, capable of hitting targets from great distances, continued to wait for the opportunity. The UAV's silence seemed like a sign that they had been neutralized, but in reality, they were still getting closer to the target. But would the UAVs have enough time to destroy the oil refinery without being detected? Could they complete the mission without being picked up by Russia's powerful electronic tracking systems? The UAVs were now fighting not only against Russia's air defense systems but also against the accuracy of their own control and guidance systems. With no signals and no help from the Ukrainian command system, they were entirely reliant on themselves. These UAVs were not just attack tools. They were symbols of electronic warfare, where technology constantly reshapes the battlefield. At this point, the Ukrainian UAVs were no longer just invisible shadows gliding through space, but real drones engaged in combat with an unseen force. Their silence, which seemed like a lifeline, was in fact a double-edged sword. Although the signals were completely cut off to avoid detection by Mosa-1, Russia's electronic eavesdropping system, the UAVs now faced a different nightmare. Boris-Oblast-2, the most powerful jamming system ever possessed by the Russian military. This was not just a battle between machines and technology, but a life-or-death challenge. Boris-Oblast-2, with its powerful signal broadcasting capabilities, could completely jam all GPS, signals, and electronic communications. The UAVs, which had already lost their communication signals, now faced an entirely new threat, losing their sense of direction, while the INS, inertial navigation system, could not maintain accuracy over extended periods. The interference from Boris-Oblast-2 rendered all calculations useless. The UAV's electronic signals were distorted and broken, making it impossible to pinpoint their exact location. These UAVs were flying blindly, and this could lead to a tragic end. On the Russian side, realizing that the UAVs were flying without full control, they did not hesitate to strike. The Mosa-1 system, although unable to emit signals, was extremely effective at tracking even the slightest movements. Every noise from the UAV's engine, no matter how small, was recorded and analyzed by Mosa-1. Using advanced algorithms, Mosa-1 could pinpoint the UAV's location even when it attempted to evade detection. Once this information was gathered, Russia's S-400 or S-300 missiles could be launched within seconds, maximizing the destructive power of the Russian military. However, the Ukrainian UAVs did not give up. Realizing the imminent danger, one drone in the formation made a bold move. It began to transmit a signal again, albeit for just a few brief seconds, but enough to completely disrupt Russia's control systems. The cost was the loss of one UAV, but in that moment, the entire formation obtained the exact coordinates to continue their mission. Although deceived by a decoy UAV, Russia's defense systems couldn't respond in WWAV time. Once again, the drones had outsmarted the enemy's tracking systems, but this could only last for a limited time. Meanwhile, Russia didn't let up. The penicillin system, with its extremely sensitive sound analysis capabilities, began tracking the UAV's engine signals. Without the need for radar, electronic signal scanning systems, penicillin only needed to listen to the faintest sounds, accurate to microseconds. The UAV engines, though small, still emitted a consistent sound pattern, which penicillin could easily analyze. This system not only listened but also calculated, using Doppler shift technology to pinpoint the exact location of each UAV in the formation. At this point, the battle was not only happening between electronic signals, but also a confrontation between the most advanced technologies of both sides. Despite the UAV's efforts to evade detection, the presence of penicillin introduced a new element into modern warfare, a battle of sounds between the invisible traces that machines could hear. The Ukrainian UAVs, although temporarily evading missiles and radar, now faced an enemy that could track them without any signals from the drones. With no way out, The UAVs were forced to use all their electronic warfare techniques to counter Russia's tracking systems. Having once again succeeded in deceiving radar, the UAVs could no longer fully rely on silence. The battle continued, not only between missiles, but also between invisible signals, between sounds that the naked eye could not see. Despite all the sophisticated electronic systems and divine tactics of deception, as the Ukrainian UAVs neared their target, they discovered that the attack was not as simple as they had thought. An unforeseen threat had appeared. Not missiles, not radar, but something far more dangerous. A fake GPS unit set up to lead the UAVs into a deadly trap. With the ability to broadcast powerful fake GPS signals, Russia's Pol-21 system was immediately activated. This was not just a missile or radar attack, but a battle on the platform of information. A battle of wits between advanced technology and human intelligence. Pol-21 was designed not only to block GPS signals, but also to emit fake signals, causing the UAVs to believe they were flying in the right direction, while in reality, they were being cleverly misled. Just seconds after the UAVs entered the range of the Pol-21 system, all of their GPS signals were distorted. The UAV's control systems noticed that their position no longer matched their actual coordinates. However, with optical sensors and the INS, inertial navigation system, they were still able to maintain speed and course. But the INS error began to accumulate rapidly, making the mission extremely difficult. The UAV's automatic systems could no longer calculate the position accurately when GPS had been interfered with, and every second that passed was a blurry, dangerous distance. In that moment, one UAV in the formation began transmitting an abnormal signal. It was an unavoidable move. This UAV, like prey drawn into a trap, was heading toward what it believed to be the primary target. Although the fake GPS signals had caused the entire formation to lose its way, this UAV remained steadfast in its belief in its mission. But unfortunately, in the final moments, the UAV's sensors detected a distinct difference between its actual position and the information provided by the fake GPS. This UAV realized it had fallen into a trap. However, the late realization couldn't save anything. At the same time, in a bold move, the remaining UAVs began adjusting their trajectories to avoid the disrupted area. They decided to use a dispersal tactic, breaking the formation into smaller groups to minimize the chances of a simultaneous attack. However, at this point, everything was no longer under their control. Even though they had avoided missiles and radar, the Ukrainian UAVs now faced an entirely different kind of attack. The S-300 system. Triggered by the fake signals, the S-300 quickly locked onto its targets. Although the UAVs attempted to alter their trajectories to avoid the missiles, this dispersal only increased the risk of the UAVs being shot down. Russia's air defense system, now relying not on radar but on sound, signals and electronic information from new scanning systems, targeted the UAVs. The S-300 missiles continued to zoom in on the designated targets. In reality, despite all the UAVs and electronic defense measures, they could not avoid the precisely guided missiles. All that remained was a race against time. As the UAVs started to distance themselves from the target, they still faced unforeseen obstacles. Russia's penicillin system, an extremely sensitive sound detection tool, not only identified the UAVs through engine sounds, but also had the ability to analyze the exact position and direction of each one. This forced the UAVs to fly under extreme stress. If they were detected, everything would end in the blink of an eye. The temporary dispersal tactic was effective, but it wasn't enough to ensure safety. Even though there were no clear signals from the UAVs, the enemy could still pinpoint their positions using superior electronic tools. Despite the highly intelligent and daring tactics, the goal was still far away, and each UAV had to continue fighting not only the enemy but also time itself. The decisive moment had arrived. In just a few minutes, the Ukrainian UAVs would be near their ported target, and that was when Russia's final defense systems would strike. Every electronic signal, every sound signal was being closely monitored. At this point, there was no room for error, and the UAVs had become the final warriors in a merciless battle. A penicillin system was waiting for them, designed to track every sound signal, even the faintest. Penicillin could pinpoint the exact location of any vehicle, from planes to drones, just by the sound of their engines. Despite the Ukrainian UAV's efforts to shut down their electronic signals, they could not stop emitting noise from their engines. This was a battle between two worlds, one of cutting-edge electronic technology and the other of silence, a tactic reliant on the smallest of sounds. In that moment, one UAV decided to employ a bold strategy. It attempted to disrupt the Penicillin system by altering the frequency of its engine. Sudden changes in speed and direction made it difficult for Russia's sound tracking system to precisely locate it. But this tactic, though risky, pushed the UAVs into an inescapable situation. One UAV, overwhelmed by the pressure of evading electronic systems and radar, suddenly became trapped in the web of fake signals. Misled by Russia's fake GPS system, this UAV fell into the trap the enemy had prepared. But instead of giving up, it pushed itself to break free from that spiral. Thanks to sophisticated control from optical sensors and the INS system, the UAV attempted to realign itself, despite the growing uncertainty around it. On the Russian side, noticing that the UAV was off course, they fired. A missile from the S-300 system was launched, targeting the struggling drone. However, in the brief moment before the missile could reach its target, the UAV made a sharp turn, decelerating and changing direction abruptly. This caused the missile to lose its bearings and veer off course. Once again, Ukraine's creative tactics saved the drone, but this success was only temporary. The remaining UAVs were still on their way to the target, and another danger was lurking. Russia's defense systems were not limited to regular missiles. Tor M2 radars and missiles had been deployed to handle this situation. Tor M2 is a powerful, short-range air defense system designed to destroy small, low-flying targets like UAVs. The TOR-M2 radars began scanning for targets closing in. Each UAV in the Ukrainian formation now faced a new threat, an unforeseen challenge. Yet despite all the dangers, Ukraine's dispersal strategy continued to prove effective. Each UAV maximized its missile evasion capabilities by constantly changing altitude and not following any fixed trajectory. These sudden changes left Russia's air defense system struggling. Missiles were fired, but could not reach their targets, as the systems could not track targets moving too fast and unpredictably. Meanwhile, one of the UAVs was getting closer to the target than ever before. No longer just a simple tactic, this had now become a life-or-death battle. The target was an important oil refinery where components for Russia's air defense missile systems were produced. With each passing minute, the attack became even more tense. The Ukrainian UAVs were facing a major challenge: to overcome sophisticated defense systems and complete their mission. Each UAV was now not only a combat vehicle but an integral part of a larger strategy. With every passing second, the pressure mounted. The entire formation knew they could not afford to fail. Every decision could change the course of the battlefield.